Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into something I find absolutely fascinating. How massive alcoholic beverage companies mathematically audit their ingredient supply chains for environmental and social risks. We're going to break down the exact industry formulas used to calculate supplier non-conformance rates and see how they track corrective actions. All right, let's jump right in.
So, I want you to start by asking yourself, how secure is your ingredient supply chain really? Companies in the alcoholic beverage space source a massive range of agricultural inputs from all over the globe. But here's the catch. These global supply chains are incredibly vulnerable to social and environmental disruptions. It's not just about acquiring the ingredients. It's about exactly how they are sourced.
If we don't have a solid mathematical approach to auditing the macro risks, they are literally catastrophic. If a company fails to properly screen and monitor its suppliers, a sudden supply chain interruption could cause an immediate loss of revenue and entirely tank market share if you can't find alternatives. On top of that, ethical issues related to labor practices or the environment can trigger massive regulatory fines and permanently increase operational costs. Because this is such a highly consumer-facing industry, the reputational damage from a supplier's bad actions can be totally devastating. This is exactly why we need to track this data closely.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The supply chain risk. 2. Defining nonconformances. 3. Calculating nonconformance rates. 4. The corrective action clock. 5. Calculating corrective action rates. And 6. Why these audits matter.
Okay, Part 1. The supply chain risk. We're grounding this in the SASB standards, specifically Metric FB AB 438.1. This establishes the strict reporting requirements for tracking the environmental and social impacts of the ingredient supply chain. It mandates that companies report their suppliers' social and environmental responsibility audit non-conformance rates as well as their corrective action rates.
Moving on to Part 2. Defining non-conformances.
Now, the standard establishes a critical dichotomy between two very different types of supplier issues. On one side, we have the major nonconformance. This is the absolute highest severity of nonconformance and requires immediate escalation by auditors. On the flip side is the minor nonconformance. These are typically isolated, kind of random incidents that, on their own, don't necessarily indicate a systemic problem with the management system. They represent minimal risk. This split is absolutely vital because it dictates the rest of the audit math and the urgency of our timelines.
So the crucial point here is understanding just how severe a major nonconformance really is. According to the standard, this includes horrific findings. We're talking underage child workers, forced labor, or health and safety issues that cause immediate danger to life or serious injury. It also includes environmental practices causing serious and immediate harm to the community or material systemic breaking of local laws. These are high-stakes, severe issues that cannot be ignored for a second.
Let's look at Part 3. Calculating non-conformance rates.
So how do we actually calculate this? To find your non-conformance rate, you take your numerator, which is the total number of non-conformances you actually identified, and divide it by your denominator, which is the total number of supplier facilities audited. And remember, the standard requires companies to calculate and report this rate separately for major non-conformances and minor non-conformances. It gives you a crystal clear mathematical picture of supplier compliance.
Next up, Part 4. The corrective action clock. Because finding the problems, that's really only half the battle. A corrective action is mandated by the standard as the mechanism to permanently fix a problem. Not a band-aid, a permanent fix. By definition, it is the completion of an action designed to totally eliminate the root cause of that detected nonconformance. And it must be done within a highly specific time frame.
The standard is incredibly strict about what actually counts as a completed corrective action. It's an exact three-step process. Step 1, you must implement a practice or system to completely eliminate the nonconformance. Step 2, you have to put measures in place to ensure against the reoccurrence of that issue. And Step 3, there must be absolute verification that the action actually took place. Only when all three steps are done does it officially count. And here is where that ticking clock comes into play. 90. That is the strict number of days a supplier has to complete a corrective action. Well, actually, to be specific, that's the absolute deadline for a major nonconformance. Because of the extreme severity of those major issues, the standard mandates this absolute 90-day deadline to eliminate the root cause and verify the fix.
But wait, what about minor nonconformances? 60 days! Interestingly, minor nonconformances actually have a slightly tighter window of 60 days for correction. This contrasts the timeline based on severity, setting strict, unyielding deadlines for both categories to ensure supply chains are rapidly brought back into compliance across the board.
All right, Part 5. Calculating corrective action rates.
Let's look at the second formula. To find your corrective action rate, your numerator is the number of corrective actions successfully completed, meaning they hit all 3 steps within that 60 or 90-day window. You divide that by your denominator, which is the total number of non-conformances originally identified. And just like before, this rate must be calculated and reported separately for major issues and minor issues. This is what proves to stakeholders that when a company finds a supply chain problem, they actually solve it.
Finally, Part 6. Why these audits matter.
Look, these aren't just arbitrary math problems. They are massive drivers of true business value. When a company actively engages with key suppliers to manage these environmental and social risks, they drastically improve their supply chain resiliency. They mitigate those terrifying reputational risks we talked about earlier. And on the positive side, demonstrating strong supply chain ethics can lead to a potential increase in consumer demand and even help the company capture brand new market opportunities.
I want to leave you with this final thought directly from the standard. Managing an entity's exposure to environmental and social risks may improve supply chain resiliency and enhance an entity's reputation. It really just boils down to that. By turning complex, messy, social and environmental risks into trackable, mathematical audit rates, companies can protect their business and their consumers. So having seen the math behind the curtain, I have to ask again, just how secure do you think your own supply chain vulnerabilities are? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. It was great having you here.